Good morning and welcome to Community Church, Unitarian Universalist. What a pleasure to be with you today, both in person and those joining us online. We have a special welcome today for our four-legged friends who are with us. I'm your worship associate, Jim O'Neill. For those of you who are visitors, you might be wondering about us as Community Church. We are an open-minded, progressive, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a search for truth and meaning. At our best, ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. So please look to your weekly email for further announcements. We also have an announcement today from Deborah about our endowment. Please.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Deb Salvador. I'm new to this community and to the endowment committee, but I'm not new to UU. I've been at UU for almost 30 years now. I'm originally from New Orleans, lived in Blacksburg, Virginia for many years, where I was a member of the UU congregation there. And for most of that time, I was either treasurer and or a member of the finance committee. So being on the endowment committee is close to my heart because during that time, one of the things that I really worked toward was trying to set up an endowment fund at that congregation, which finally, just as I was leaving, got started, because as you learned last week with the history, it's not an easy thing to get one of those going. But the reason why I pushed for it was because, every year when you do your budget, you have to fill in for all of those things that you need to do on a regular basis. And the question would always arise, but how can we give back to the community? We can't have any bigger budget than we have now. We need to, keep it within a certain range. And so the idea of an endowment fund is a way to be able to do that, to give back not only to the outside community, but to fund those special projects like have been funded here, things like the sound system that was fortuitously put in place right before it was really needed. Those are things that don't fit into a regular budget, and so the endowment fund can do that. It can do that in a way by putting funds away that are invested in a conservative yet growth manner so that we can accumulate funds to fund those projects, not only like the ones that have been funded for our community here, but for the greater community, things like Red Flame Hunters, which give young men opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have to do something more something in a good fashion with their lives. And also another one that we've been, that you'll be hearing more about next week, the Melba Reading Program, which has now gotten national acclaim, and they're being asked by people all over the country how to set this up. That one is particularly close to my heart because I grew up in the neighborhood where Melba's is, and I know that it was a tough community to grow up when I was young, and it's much tougher now. And so giving people the opportunity to have books and exposure to authors, just a wonderful thing that we can give to, and we're giving to those kinds of projects as well as things like the UU Disaster Fund, where we know what it's like to go through a disaster, been there, done that. We know that it's good to have those who can help us. So there's so many ways that an endowment fund can help to fill that need, where we give back to our greater community and also enrich our own community. And for me, I always felt like enriching our community is a way to enrich myself. So I encourage you, there are many different ways to give to the endowment fund. You can always give. Actually, part of the plate today will go towards the endowment fund. There are ways to do it through bequest, through required minimum distribution, contributions that can be done very tax efficiently, just a lot of different ways. And I myself, or Joe Lee, Rebecca, other people who are on the committee, we're always happy to talk to you about ways that you can be a part of this great work. So I thank you for your time today, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you, Deborah. We will now proceed with our land acknowledgement. If you wish to read, it's on the back of your order of service. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of an indigenous trade hub on the Mississippi River. Known for thousands of years as Bubancha. Tribes that have lived on this land include the Caddo, the Natchez, the Choctaw, the Chitimacha, Homa, the Tunica, Biloxi, Attakapas, Ishk, among others. We recognize that as a result of broken treaties and involuntary removals, Native Americans were often forced from their lands. We remember and pay respect to the communities impacted by these actions. Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our local culture. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the indigenous nations that have lived and continue to thrive here. Today we're delighted to have our pastor, Stacey Mitchell, deliver the Sunday message, UUAM Ministries, Animals as Companions, Friends, Family, and Heroes. She will now deliver the opening words.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Barkus Day. So I'm so happy to see some dogs here for those of us joining the Barkus Parade after this service. So our opening words today are from Mark Beckhoff, who is a biologist and behavioral ecologist. His words are, "Human beings are a part of the animal kingdom, not apart from it. The separation of us and them creates a false picture and is responsible for much suffering. It is part of the in-group, out-group mentality that leads to human oppression of the weak by the strong as in ethic, religious, political, and social conflicts."
It is Community Church's custom to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship. Please join us in singing, "We Light This Flame." Cynthia Ramirez and her assistant, Diablo.
It's like a pilot. Let's see if he can do his attention here. I'll keep him over here. All right. Good morning. And welcome to Bacchus Day. And I have a book called The Crew of Barkus and Meow, spelled M-E-O-U-X. It was time for Fat Tuesday. You know what I mean. You know what that means. There were hundreds of celebrations throughout New Orleans. I'll show you the fabulous. Between two crews, great rivals stood tall, parading at the front for the Barkus and Meow Ball. There was whooping and hollering and jazz all around. The big band so loud you could feel your heart pound. With the purring cacophony, drums began to beat the hoodoo of voodoo of cats in the street. They arched and switched their tails. There was no time to waste, for this was the dance-off they needed first place. The climbing the walls. Suddenly, poodles and poms marched into the square, bulldogs and Bostons twirling through the air. Canines climbed up on statues and posed on the ground. It was an impressive effort, but there was one more round. The royalty of Meow stepped into the street, stood, I guess it's reveille, and pointed their feet. It was quite the performance, the crowd all agreed. The pirouettes were perfect, and was Meow in the lead? The queen of the canines stepped into the square, paused her paws, and paused. It was dramatic with flair. Clap, clap, she twirled. Clap, clap, she spun. Guitar strings strummed. Her skirt stilled. She was done. The count consulted. They had to pick an air, but no one had lost. Was it possible to share? Both sides stared, their eyes grew wide. It suddenly hit them. They could not pick a side. The crowds roared approval, the crews danced in the night. Celebrations continue. They would no longer fight. What does this mean? The contest was done. The crews both combined, and now they are one. Happy Barkus and Meow.
Now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you're online, please write your joys or sorrows in the comments to be read aloud after our musical interlude. If you're here and would like to come up to the microphone to share a joy or sorrow, you're welcome to do so, or our usher will give you a card if you want to write your joy or sorrow to be read here. We thank you. Will Hun is with us today and shares a sorrow. My little Shih Tzu companion of the past 7 years became quite ill this past week, and I made the painful decision to end her suffering. She was a sweetheart, and I loved her dearly. We light a candle and extend our sympathy and empathy to you. And this from Jada de Colette. I've been having health issues and I'm seeing a cardiologist on Friday. And so we hold you, Jada, in our hearts. And a joy for those who want to participate in Carnival today. The storm is past and we have a beautiful sunshiny day. Are there any others? Thank you, Alan. We now light an additional candle for the joys that may be bubbling up inside but haven't found words yet. And of course an additional candle for the sorrows that are heavy on the heart but haven't been spoken.
So I'm going to start with a couple readings for us this morning. And before I begin with our first reading, I want to share a definition of a word that some of you might not know. Anthropocene. Anthropocene is the period of time during which human activities have had an environmental impact on Earth, constituting a distinct geological age, whether following the Holocene era or a subcategory of the Holocene. Most scientists agree that humans have significantly contributed in the warming of Earth's climate since the Industrial Revolution. The Holocene has been a geographical epoch we have been living in as humans up until this point. The Holocene began approximately 9,700 BCE after the last glacial period. National Geographic states scientists still debate whether the Anthropocene is different from Holocene, and the term has not been formally adopted by the International Union of Geological Sciences. In 2016, the Anthropocene Working Group agreed that the Anthropocene is different from the Holocene and began in the year 1950, when the great acceleration, a dramatic increase in human activity affecting the planet took off. So our first reading is from Jeff Sebo, author of Saving Animals, Saving Ourselves, What Harms Them Harms Us. He's Director of Animal Studies at New York University. The Anthropocene blurs the distinction between natural and human-caused harms. Many people assume that we should leave wild animals alone. But in a world reshaped by human activity, leaving wild animals alone is no longer an option. Human activity is already impacting wild animals both directly and indirectly, whether we like it or not. The only question now is how, if at all, we can improve our impacts on wild animals. These issues are both urgent and complex. We need to help other animals, but we also lack the ability to do this work well, due to the limits of our knowledge, power, and political will. The reality can be hard to accept because it can be painful to acknowledge that we lack the ability to do what we need to do. As a first step towards ethical and effective action, then, we need to accept our responsibilities and our limitations in equal measure. Progress requires holistic, structural, and comprehensive change. In order to develop ethical and effective policies, we need to consider humans, animals, and the environment holistically. We need to build political, economic, and ecological structures that accommodate everyone. And we need to consider the indirect effects of our actions and policies, including the effects that human-caused environmental changes will have on other animals. We need to change individual hearts and minds to build support for our structural, legal, political, economic, and ecological changes. But we also need to make those structural changes to make it easier for individuals to make respectful, compassionate choices in their lives. Our second reading today is from author Robin Wall Kimmerer of her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And this is an excerpt from her chapter called Sky Woman. She fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on that autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear or maybe hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below. But in that emptiness, there were many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. They saw there a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. As it grew closer, they could see it was a woman. Arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled toward them. The geese nodded at one another and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of the wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from the only home she'd ever known, she caught her breath at the warm embrace of soft feathers as they gently carried her downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold the woman above the water for much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gather. Loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A great turtle floated in the midst and offered his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while he suffered with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals offered to help, otter, beaver, sturgeon, but the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest of swimmers. They returned gasping for air and their heads ringing. Some did not return at all. Soon, only little muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone for a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, featuring the worst for their relative. And before long, a stream of bubbles rose with a small limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human. But then others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched. When they opened it, there was a little small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of the turtle. Moved by extraordinary gifts of the animal, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks from the dab on Turtle's back until the whole earth was made. Not by Sky Woman alone, but the alchemy of all the animals, gifts coupled with her deep gratitude. Today, they formed what we know as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clutched in her hand. When she toppled from the hole in the sky world, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruits, and seeds of all kinds of plants. These she scattered onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that animals, too, had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. So that is one creation story that has been gifted to us from the Indigenous community. In contrast to the Native American story of Sky Woman, which was just read, that describes the beginning of life on Earth, we have our Judeo-Christian stories that dominate Western culture. I believe that religious views are reflective on our cultural understandings. In other words, religion is a cultural expression of the origins and meaning of life within the culture we are born to or choose to adopt. Actually, when I reflect on chapter 1 of Genesis, some of the origins aren't that much different. Genesis chapter 1 says, "In the beginning, when God created the heavens and earth, the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. God said that light was good, and God separated light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, 'Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.' So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, 'Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear.' And so it was. God called the dry land earth. And the waters that were gathered he called seas. And God saw that it was good." And if you substitute Sky Woman for God, the following verses could be similar as well as what was just read. Then God, or Sky Woman, said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, planting, yielding seed and fruit trees on every kind of earth that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And so it was. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit and with seed and according to their kind. And God, or Sky Woman, said it was good. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And so it was. The stories remain similar but diverge a bit more in verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. and let them have dominion over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created in them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish in the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves on earth." We can reflect on the story of Sky Woman, sharing the earth compared to the Bible, with humans ruling in some translations, or having that dominion over them. It is a subtle but distinct difference. Some debate can be given on the translations, ruler, subduer, or caretaker, or steward. And it is said that God made man in his image. But one can argue man created God in his image due to the limited subjective experiences humans have relative to other forms of life. Did God create man in his image, as if man had the same capabilities of God? I don't know. And did God make trees, muskrat, geese, and turtles in his or her image as well? I suppose there are at least two ways to approach the creation story. One is that God set up everything for humans in a sequential order so that humans would have dominion over all and use power in lieu of God, as if humans had a right to damn, punish, manipulate, and control all, as some religious views have of God's role, which is totally juxtaposed and contradictory to the universalist religious view that God is love and always acts in love. One could wonder, in a traditional Christian sense, did God create man in his image? Or did man create a certain image of God over time to reflect his own idolatry views of himself to support the creation of power for themselves? Unitarian Universalists have principles that guide us in how we live our faith into the world, and we have many groups that work on human rights, education, and social justice to guide how we live out our faith. One of those organizations within Unitarian Universalism is the Unitarian Universalist Animal Ministry, known as UUAM. UUAM's mission statement is to promote understanding and awareness of animals as fellow sentient beings in line with the seventh Unitarian Universalist principle, and to provide animal advocacy, ministry, education, and support to the members of the church community as a whole. Our Unitarian Universalist seventh principle is the respect of the interdependent web of all of existence of which we are part. The UUAM states they have four guiding principles. The first one is intersectionality, taking seriously the interactions of racial justice, gender, poverty, class, ability, animal exploitation, environmental degradation, and more. And they say we seek to build a world that is more just, inclusive, and equitable. The second guiding principle is internationalism, based largely in North America. They serve Unitarian Universalists throughout the world. Third guiding principle is interfaith, stating we value the work of other faith movements and collaborate to build wisdom and effectiveness. The fourth guiding principle is interdependence. Ecologically, they say we protect the integrity of the web of life that human and non-human animals share. They state we do good work not just for non-human animals, but for people and all of life, knowing that our connection with a more than human world helps us live more fully, deeply, and authentically. So for those who wish to support the welfare of animals and awareness of animals as fellow sentient beings, our theology supports this endeavor, and actually for quite some time. And I bet some of you didn't know that Unitarians were instrumental in the formation of the ASCPA. The ASPCA, Animal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, states about their founder, Henry Bergh. While on assignment in Russia as an American diplomat, a New Yorker named Henry Bergh stopped a carriage driver from beating his fallen horse. The year was 1863, and it was then and there that Bergh realized the effect he could have on the world. He soon resigned his post and returned to New York to devote his energy to the prevention of cruelty to animals. In 1866, he founded the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty of Animals. So Bergh attended First Congregational Church of New York City, the precursor for Unitarian Church of All Souls. Bergh brought along other Unitarians and Universalists, including Horace Greeley, who was the Universalist editor of the New York Tribune, his own minister, Reverend Bellows, Louisa M. Alcott, Unitarian and author of Little Woman, as well as Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, who served as honorary vice president of the Massachusetts chapter. The ASPCA's mission is to save animals from dogfighting, puppy mills, hoarding, and other cruelty situations. They provide animals medical care and behavioral rehabilitation and help thousands of animals find loving homes every year. We respond, they say, to emergencies when disaster strikes and fight for stronger laws to protect animals. Many of you who lived here during Katrina know the work the ASPCA did in saving animals during that time, as well as other nonprofits who work to save and protect animals. Animals are blessings at so many multiple levels of our lives and worthy of protection. What I do know from my own experience in having a dog in my life is that my dog understands in his own way that we are in an emotional symbiotic relationship with each other. If his welfare is taken into account, he reciprocates that appreciation. Some dogs serve and protect human life, whether emotional support animals, service animals, helping the blind, assisting those with seizures, and helping some with balance issues depending on their health conditions. There are those who serve at fire departments and law enforcement institutions, those that rescue with the Coast Guard, those who help with mountain rescue, among other life-supporting efforts. It is now said that dogs can help sniff cancer in its early stages. It has been studied that animals can detect pressure changes in weather before humans can detect these weather patterns with their senses, and can warn others of impending weather catastrophes. In one of the increasing frequent tornadoes that we have here in New Orleans, I was talking to my parents recently on the phone as a tornado was due to go west of me by many miles, and I told them I was safe. I stopped looking at the weather app while I was on the phone. In the middle of the conversation, my dog began to bark and do what he never does in daylight when I'm at home. He started to shake and tried to hide in the corner of the house. I told my parents I should pay attention to the strange behavior that was happening with my dog Copper, and I hung up. Then the tornado warning went off on my phone, and I looked at the weather app as it was getting closer, and the wind suddenly whipped up in my neighborhood, and I saw that on that app that the tornado had completely shifted and was within 1 mile east of me. The wind mellowed and my dog came back to the living room as if everything was normal again. For those of us who have dogs or cats or horses, among other animals, it seems that we all have stories of how our animal companions' super capacities are engaged, including the very special one, unconditional love. Animals can be a gateway to explore and deepen our own experiences in life, whether in a secular context or in a faith-based context. Ultimately, there are distinct differences between what is in Genesis and the story of Sky Woman and the language that is used in those myths, and the stories of creation of Earth and Earth's creatures. To add to these stories, we also have our historically scientific perspective. And I will begin a way too brief summary of Earth's evolution that begins at around 5 billion years ago. Over geological time, scientists have classified certain eras of time leading up to today, what many refer to as the Anthropocene era. Geologists and astrophysicists have studied the beginnings of Earth, with the oldest rock testing at almost 5 billion years. Flash forward 350 million years ago, continents are colliding, sharks come into existence 323 million years ago, tectonic forces continue forming continents, birds diversify at significant rates at about 50 million years ago, early forms of humans, Homo erectus, begin to spread over 1 million years ago, and the spread of Homo sapiens spread under 500,000 years ago significantly. The end of Stone Age occurs, diversity of wildlife and plant life continue to flourish. Holocene period begins at around 9,700 BCE and with the last glacier period, with 1950 marking a new geological era where humans significantly shape the outcome of balance that Earth has maintained for over millennia, the Anthropocene era. So that was a quick 1-minute geology lesson spanning 5 billion years. I bring this up because this is a point where everything that has been in relative balance and where diversity increased becomes off balance extremely quickly. We see the impact of war, of industrialization, of dominating Earth, along with Earth's animals being endangered in ways that have never occurred in geological time, let alone human time here on Earth. In the Anthropocene age, we are now at a stage of losing diversity at rapid rates. We have individualized life through a reductionist movement to serve private selves, seeing worth in what is commodified for our own purposes with tragic results. Life has broken itself into private parts that cannot sustain itself without the love and the other parts that it has torn itself apart from. If our climate change disaster has taught us anything, it is that we are interconnected to every part of Earth. Millions of bison once roamed centuries ago. Other wildlife thrived on land and sea. These numbers haven't only drastically cut since the time of colonialism, but in time since the Industrial Revolution. In order to see our Earth and the animals who live on Earth thrive with humans, repair must occur. Some are already engaged in this repair, and one of these ways is through animal ministry. Our dogs and other pets can bring us to a way of relying on each other as companions, as mammals who share the earth as a promise for joy in the world. As Sky Woman saw all the blessings found in the animal world at the beginning of time for humans who live now on Earth. As we came into this world according to the story of Sky Woman, we can once again realize the need for this deep connection, to return from what we separated from, the seeds that plant all the foods and beauty of this earth, the land and the rivers and the birds and the insects, the buffalo, the deer, the elephants, the lions, the wolves, the coyote, and our domesticated cats and dogs of our lives. They are the gateways to see all the love and beauty of this world and all that is sacred. Earth has offered so much beauty and love from the animal world, and humanity over the years has contributed to so much suffering. We can help Now, whether adopting an animal, donating to wildlife causes, volunteering at a humane society or ASPCA, becoming vegetarian, or doing other advocacy work, there's so many opportunities. UUAM states, at the heart of the religious impulse is the desire to lessen suffering and to extend justice and compassion to those we might otherwise exclude from our moral consideration. So in that vision, may our religious impulse always help with the vision of lessening suffering in this world, and to always bring compassion, not just to all of humanity, but to all of life. May it be so, and amen. At this time, we have our offertory. This is a chance to donate as well as pledge your amount. And as with all Sundays, we share the plate. And what was mentioned earlier, as for the month of February, we are keeping everything in-house, so to say. So 50% will go to the general fund and 50% will go to our endowment fund. So thank you for giving generously. And Nicholas will now lead us in our offertory. So we extinguish the chalice here that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. May it guide your way until we are together again. So our next hymn is In the Branches of the Forest, number 173. some of our congregation gets ready to participate in the annual Mardi Gras Barkus, where dog lovers and dog advocates unite to support the welfare of our four-legged friends. In the words of Bruce Cameron, author of Love Clancy, Diary of a Good Dog, which is written from the perspective of the dog, says, "Dear Diary, a dog park is a place where people go to sit on benches and watch in amazement how much fun it is to be a dog." And I will also quote Will Rogers, who said, "If there are no dogs in heaven, then when I die, I want to go where they went." May it be so, and amen.